Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Today we're covering emerging trends in real estate, the report done by ULI and PwC. That's fantastic every year. We'll have a copy or a link to the actual report at CREshow.com. My guests are Tim Bodner. He's real estate deals leader with PwC, and Byron Carlock. He's real estate practice leader with PwC. We're here in Studio One, and we went through the top five. We'll put a link there if you haven't seen or heard that one yet. But now let's go to number 6, finding a higher purpose. Tell us about that.
Well, I think this is a season, even though we've got higher interest rates, we have begun an effort to begin reimagining our built environment. The intersection between living, working, walking, enjoying our cities. There's a real interesting push for helping people accomplish what's known as the 15-minute lifestyle, where you can live, work, walk, eat within a walking distance and not have to spend so much time in your car. Improvements in our rapid transit system. We've been talking about this for years, but the idea of moving toward this driverless car environment that we expect within the next 10 years, more utilization of public transportation. I just read a book by Roger Scruton, a philosopher from Britain, that talked about in times of ideological distancing, which of course we see that in our country right now, things that we do agree on across world history are things of art, culture, beauty, green space, architecture, gathering places. And you think about, this is a great time for us to reimagine our built environments and force the cooperation between public interests, private interests, and philanthropy to do so.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things that is embedded in there, Byron, that we're seeing significant momentum is what's happening in and around sports and live entertainment, and how many of these franchises in areas like Chicago, down in Tennessee, in Southern California, are really leaning in LA as a great example, are really leaning into kind of addressing exactly what Byron is addressing, and saying, like, well, we have a role to play in the community. We ought to kind of reimagine what life is like around our stadiums. And so that's an area to watch, is these franchises around the country, and candidly even internationally, which isn't a focus here, but in the U.S., what they're doing, because there's a lot of momentum and activity there.
Yeah, and if any of your listeners or viewers get to Atlanta, the Battery, where the Atlanta Braves play, is really good.
It's a nice community now.
Yeah,
right.
It's very well done. And when you think about the pandemic and the worst thing about the kind of going to the office seems to be with employees, the commute. Mm-hmm. Right, that seems to be one of the worst things. And I guess, if we're in a mixed-use development, where live, work, and play in the same 15-minute area, that kind of takes care of the worst problem of going to the office, right?
That's right. I mean, a good example of that, and sticking with the theme we were just on, is what the Cowboys are doing in and around Dallas, with kind of office buildings proximate to kind of their stadium, creating this community ecosystem that I think is directly on point with what you're saying there, Mike.
And it's not a new idea. If you read the book, The Pattern Language, this is how development began and grew in Europe. Mm-hmm. Sadly, after World War II, we really screwed it up with too much suburban sprawl.
Yeah.
We've been talking years about turning that inward and then filling in and making communities around what we've built, as opposed to expanding that built environment. Let's better use what we've got.
Yeah, I used to have 2 homes. Don't hate me. I'm helping the American dream, spending money, right? I'm helping the economy. But now I went down to 1 home and a rental and a mixed-use development. I really loved it.
I bet you're walking to work now.
Yeah, I can walk to work, but I live in Atlanta. We drive cars. Are you kidding me? We're a car environment. All right, so let's talk about number 7, rewards and growing pains in the Sunbelt areas. Kind of the Sunbelt, the Smile States have been doing really well.
Well, I think two examples of note. I mean, the greatness of living in Nashville and Austin, for example, 2 of the highest quality of life cities in that growth spurt through the Smile States, are now having to face the fact that their infrastructure is strained. And so those are growing pains, and it's going to take a lot of money to think about creating rapid transit in those markets and changing the dynamic between the auto lifestyle and the walking lifestyle. Others are also looking at, what kind of cities do they want to be? I think Tennessee and Texas, for example, have really embraced the idea of being business friendly, no state income tax states and have enjoyed the population growth and corporate relocation activity from that. Now they have to think about absorbing that population and making the quality of life match the growth opportunity.
Right. And there's still markets, though, that investors and companies like, right?
That's right. I mean, as an example, to use Nashville as an example, that still is the number one market on this year's survey. Austin's still in the top 10. There's still growth, but to Byron's point, there's some structural things around infrastructure and the like that they need to be addressed.
Yeah, and let's tease. We're going to talk about the top 10 markets from this report from 1 to 10, so stay tuned for that. Okay, and the next one involves number 8, infrastructure, right? Smarter, fair cities. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think when, in our last edition of Emerging Trends in Real Estate, we focused on infrastructure and how it was being driven by state and local governments. What we've seen happen more recently is the federal government, starting to step up and do things through the infrastructure bill, through the Inflation Reduction Act. They're addressing some real societal issues around transportation, around broadband access, around addressing kind of some of the historical issues that were created by certain development activities in terms of dividing neighborhoods. And so we kind of look at what's happening in and around infrastructure as kind of a way that will kind of help overall real estate investment and growth in the sector.
And open new submarkets. I think as we address our food deserts and our healthcare deserts with incentives to do it right this time and open up neighborhoods for greater inclusion and easier access, I think that's all good for society. And I think I see our industry stepping up to be leaders in that. But once again, I go back to that triangle of when you can marry the public interest with private investment that makes sense and philanthropy, great things can happen.
Yeah, and this government investment in infrastructure, how big a deal is that for the commercial real estate industry?
Well, I'll use an example from Dallas. I'll use an example where University of Texas at Southwestern Medical Center has taken a large tract of land in South Dallas in Redbird to create a new healthcare center. And around it, you see developers responding to create a community around that healthcare center, which has traditionally been a healthcare desert. So with that will come new food offerings to help with what could be perceived as a food desert as well, and then create living opportunities around it that enhance the quality of life for that quadrant of the city.
Yeah. Well, let's go to number 9, and involves climate change, growing impact on real estate. So we're feeling it, huh?
Yeah, look, I think it's driven a lot by investors, right? And there's a number of actions that have been taken by certain real estate trade organizations like PREA and the like. NATCREIF is another example, as well as by certain regulators like the SEC. And so companies are starting to kind of lean into this. I think the interesting thing to observe here is how long does this really fundamentally take when you look at the investment horizon that certain real estate investors have. How much do they want to lean in and invest the capital versus just insure against it, and how does that push-pull kind of play out over time? But I think for sure, the impact of climate change on real estate and the realization that real estate, the stakeholders have an important role to play is here for sure.
So ESG breaks down environmental, social, and governance. The environmental piece is really stepping up its importance in delineation between buildings that have the quality that tenants are wanting to use, the qualities that lenders are wanting to lend against, and the qualities that investors are willing to invest in. And those that don't are going to fall into a category that may be subject to what's known as the brown discount. And they have to be improved to meet the quality standards of the environmental expectations of a property: air quality, energy usage and efficiency, parking, in many cases reductions, improved green space, landscaping, changing the nature of using real estate to change the nature of the carbon footprint, because real estate is the largest producer of carbon through steel and concrete. So it's better to redevelop something than to develop something ground up, but it requires investment to bring those standards up to new levels of relevance, and those that don't may be penalized.
Yeah, well, good point. I mean, we have office tenant reps here at our shop who work in Atlanta, And, some of these environmental issues, the properties don't get on the list, right? You look at the building we're in, it's a very nice building. We're on the top floor, great views over the trees, but you still have to touch the front doors to get in and out. And even though it's an elevator building and a dense environment, and that just seems archaic at this point.
Lots of innovation will drive us toward higher standards. Also, the SEC is going to require disclosure. You're going to have to disclose the environmental nature of your business and its carbon footprint along with your financial statements in a coming disclosure by the SEC if you're a public company, and then voluntarily, as a private enterprise, to meet the expectations of your lenders and investors.
So my carbon footprint, I'm not going to do well with my performance car and my performance boat. I thought I was helping the economy, right? I'm going to have a poor rating. I probably already have a poor rating. Yeah. So, let's talk, and that leads us into number 10, action through regulation.
Yeah, I think, look, there increasingly is regulation that's impacting the real estate industry at large. The two things that kind of really came out through the survey is what cities are doing in and around rent control, kind of across a number of different municipalities. Minnesota is a state where there's been a number of initiatives, but it's broader than that, as well as vacancy taxes. And so, how governments kind of use those things like that in order to address some of the things we talked about earlier around affordability is an area that certainly there's a lot of momentum in clearly out in the survey.
What's your opinion? Should they be exercising rent control, or does that really make things worse in the end?
Well, it often tracks with ideological swings on the Hill, but policy does drive action. We see what happens in times of tax policy changes that affect the industry. The developers and investors react. The rent control issue is a hot topic, and it's on the ballot in many states each season. And California has probably led that charge for a long time. In Chicago last week, there was a new proclamation that would offer incentives from the city's TIF programs to inspire developers to do office conversions on those that have exceeded their vacancy expectations, to give them incentives to convert those buildings to residential if they will set aside 40% of the units for 80% of median income affordability. So I think policy does drive action, and we're seeing a government that is using policy to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk now about the top 10 markets as rated from the emerging trends in real estate, and then we'll just kind of recap, kind of get your ending thoughts for the audience related to the entire report and kind of one of the main takeaways you get from there. But let's go number 10 first, and we'll do the backwards countdown, right? So the city that was number 10?
Charlotte.
Yeah.
Another Sunbelt smile city, doing very well. Financial services leads that market, but it's also a very diversified economy, high quality of life, and the big bank merger that chose to make Charlotte its headquarters has been a big driver there over the last 2 years.
And number 9?
Phoenix. Yeah, I think, look, that's a classic beneficiary of the migration trend, where a lot of people are moving in and around to Phoenix. There's a lot of good things going on in Phoenix with the Super Bowl being there next year, a number of different golf tournaments, and it's still a market where people believe there's a significant quality of life advantage relative to a number of other places. And
largest concentration of build-to-rent communities right now for people to come stick their toe in the water to see if they like desert living.
Interesting. Let's go to number 8. Who made number 8?
So Boston, I think, is interesting because it's the only gateway city on the list this year, and it's probably driven mostly by the life sciences and education industries. And there is a lot of R&D, a lot of new product introduction in the life sciences space, in the research space, and that's really driving that Boston position.
And why do you think some of these primary markets are not making the top 10?
Well, recovering from the pandemic, there was a huge boomerang out, and I think next year we'll start seeing some gateway cities back on because, as we mentioned, the boomerang has taken people back to the city. So I think that's the biggest reason. But I will tell you, there are also some leadership challenges in some of our gateway cities that have got to be addressed to deal with overcoming the stigma of defunding the police, fear of crime in the streets, anti-shoplifting laws, cleanliness. I'm really worried about places like San Francisco, where the return to the office has been very slow, and the tech industry has allowed people to continue working from home. But when you go visit, it's dirty and inspires fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to require leadership in our historic and gateway cities to really step up and try to change those perceptions. I hope that's not too harsh, but it came across big in the survey this year.
Yeah, well, that the results are in, right? It is what it is, and when we're selling office buildings around the country, and we bring the group in to look at it, they're looking at those things.
They are,
right? They've got to think about it. All right, and number 7 in the countdown.
This is Miami here, and I think it's relatively self-explanatory. There's a significant growing financial services industry in Miami, but it's broader than that. Tech is kind of significantly investing in. There is a huge venture capital ecosystem in Miami, and weather, tax law, and the like are all quality of life are all reasons for why we're seeing that.
Maybe the new Southern Gateway City.
Yeah. Number 6.
Raleigh-Durham. I think Raleigh-Durham has been on the list for several years now, but it's really a great example of regionalism capitalizing on the East Coast tech sector growth in a particular concentrated area where the private sector and the education sector has come together to do great things around technology. And so some people are calling it the Silicon Valley of the East. The housing growth there has spoken for itself as a major driver for people to come in and have a relatively affordable place to live while enjoying the sector's growth. And it's in that southern smile state where you get a nice environment for weather as well.
And you get Southerners who are smiling. All right, and city that made number 5 on the list this year.
Tampa, St. Petersburg. Again, similar kind of thoughts as we were talking about with Phoenix. Favorable place to live. There's a lot of interesting things going on in and around Phoenix with around Tampa with sports and live entertainment and the like, and it's again a beneficiary of migration trends.
Yeah, I mean Florida's been really doing well, right?
That's right.
All right, and then number 4 is a city that did it drop at number 4? Austin? Did it? What
so
was
the standard deviation among the top 5 was pretty tight. So I don't think we can necessarily talk too much about the rankings. But Austin, as you know, has been a tech magnet from the California companies seeking lower cost working environments, exodus from high state income tax, and Austin is a really growing tech center. And I think that's going to continue. As we mentioned earlier, it's going to learn to deal with some of its infrastructure challenges, but it has become a tech alternative to California.
Okay. And then number 3 on the list?
Yeah, go ahead.
We should be asking you.
Yeah, we should ask Michael. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's Atlanta. And we talked about it for a whole host of reasons, but it's favorable residential markets. A lot of tech companies moving in to Atlanta. We were talking earlier about Midtown off air, but it's just a market where there's a lot of interest and people find it great infrastructure and airport and the like. So
I think a couple of stats that are really interesting is the growth of the studio industry has really changed its profile in the media industry, and it's really, some people are calling it the Hollywood of the East. But also 60 colleges and universities feed into a very diverse workforce here. And with diversity and inclusion being such an important topic in business today, Atlanta's a great city for that because it is an inclusive city.
Yeah. When I was young, one of my nicknames was Hollywood, but the other nickname I had was Conceited. All right. So the city that made number 2 this year.
You got to take this one.
Well, I'm from Dallas, and it is still the number 1 corporate relocation market in the country. It is a very attractive workforce environment, relatively affordable, is trying to address some of its infrastructure issues, and is a research center for healthcare at UT Southwestern, great educational feeders with colleges and universities, and it's another city in the heart of the smile delineation across America with no state income tax.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, let's do a drum roll for number one. Number one city is
Nashville.
Nashville.
It's not your grandfather's country music capital anymore. It's a financial services, education, healthcare hub in the center of the country, and it's a high quality of life. Enjoy the great music of its country music history, but it's a wonderful place to live, work, walk, enjoy a vibrant downtown, cultural centers. Relocations from the Northeast have proven that there's a workforce to meet their needs in the financial services industry, and it's a beautiful city.
Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, but my mother told me I was born in Nashville, but I don't really remember that day. All right, so this report is pretty incredible. I mean, how many pages is this?
Oh my goodness, 120 this year.
120. This is a great report, so do check it out. We'll have a link at Series Show. And before you guys leave us, here we are at November 2022. The world's been changing, interest rates spiking. What would you leave the audience with to think about the report and the market moving forward?
Well, I think my advice is let's proceed with caution and more equity. We've enjoyed cheap debt for a long time. We have to adjust our underwriting now to the realities of higher debt costs, but celebrate the fact that we are remaking our cities. There is still demand for these product types. Retail continues its march forward through its transformation. The top three concerns going into 2023 were inflation, interest rates, and the impact of ESG and climate change. Those are realities we're going to have to adapt to, and that may change the transaction velocity temporarily, but the demand characteristics driving growth in the real estate industry are still there. And real estate is everywhere. We all need space to live, work, and function, and to gather. And so let's do this responsibly this time and make our cities beautiful again.
Well said. I think there's people clapping on that one.
Well said. I leave it there.
No, you got to add something to this. I mean, this report is so chock full of great information, and you guys have been really involved in it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Byron summarized it well, but I think the reality is it's been so good for so long that there needed to be some level of normalization, but there still is significant opportunity, and that's what we tend to focus on.
Well, it seems like back in the day, I don't know, what was it, 20 years ago, that everything was a tent cap, right?
That's right. That's right.
It's interesting when you see people that have been in the business for 10 years and they look at these interest rates and go, oh, man, this is terrible. I remember when we got a 12% interest rate on a deal, and we're like so excited. Well, this is awesome.
Well, think about the average analyst in a real estate shop today has never seen a downturn. So I think, Michael, you and I are probably on our fourth, and so it's good learning. I think the best learning comes during those times.
Yeah, well said. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the great information. Thanks for the report as well. Thanks for being in Studio One.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us around the country. Thanks for sharing the show. And please let us know what you think. We appreciate hearing from you. You can find all our social media contacts and everything at commercialrealestateshow.com. And until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Buxton. Take leasing, site selection, and due diligence to the next level. Make the right decisions with on-demand mobile data. Visit buxtonco.com. By Bull Realty. For proven commercial real estate asset and occupancy solutions, contact me. My email is michael@bullrealty.com. By Commercial Agent Success. Expert-level commercial real estate broker training. Cloud Access 1, up to 21 one-hour videos. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com. Thank you for reviewing, subscribing, and sharing America's Commercial Real Estate Show.